host the Black Enterprise Entrepreneur Summit today through the 9th, and that we're going to have over 1,200 business leaders, established business owners, aspiring entrepreneurs here, that we just know that this is an opportunity for the Black Enterprise family to come to Charlotte to help you make connections among the entrepreneurial, corporate, and a little bit of political communities out here. We're proud to be the host city to showcase our world-class customer service, our world-class hospitality, and to allow you to make our city a better place for the entrepreneurial ecosystem. So I know that you will be having a positive impact through the benefits that you will provide with your skills and your expertise, that I, Vi Alexander Lyles, Mayor of Charlotte, proclaims June 4th through 10th, 2018 as Black Enterprise Week in Charlotte and commend its observance to all citizens. Thank you for being here. Thank you for what you do every day, not just to make this city better, your city better, to make a difference in this country for the minority community that's so essential to the success for this nation. Thank you very much.
Ladies and gentlemen, now,
you know, I am really, really grateful when not only do I get to proclaim this Black Enterprise Week, but I get to say this by having Butch Earl Gray right here standing with me to speak with you and to second our welcome, along with the chair of the City of Charlotte's Economic Development Committee, a longtime council member, and actually one of my very best colleagues in this world, James Smudgy Mitchell.
we're gonna take a photo.
We're going to take a picture first.
And one last thing, Smudgy asked me to say, tonight, you know what tonight is, right? What's tonight? Black Food Truck Thursday. So in order to get in, you have to be wearing one of these, which everyone should have inside their bag. This is actually not my size, as you can imagine. I'm a medium. But wear this tonight, and it's casual, so you can wear jeans, shorts, whatever you like. But come and support our Black Food Truck Thursday and the Black food establishments that we have at the Black Food Truck. Enjoy your lunch.
Mayor Lyles, thank you so very much. Thank you, City of Charlotte. We are so grateful for that proclamation. Can we give them another round of applause? Now, ladies and gentlemen, now please join me in welcoming my friend, mentor, and senior vice president and executive editor-at-large for Black Enterprise, Alfred E. Edmond Jr. Please give him a round of applause.
Hey, everybody. We still having a great time? Let's give another round of applause to the City of Charlotte for being such a great host. And thank you once again, Ramon. I think I owe you a couple of checks for all the nice things you say about me in public. It's very much appreciated. Your lunch has already been served, but allow me to place a blessing over it. And God can bless the food that's already in your stomach too, so it's all good. Heavenly Father, thank you for allowing us to gather here in your presence. Thank you for not only nourishing us with food and drink, but also with information, education, inspiration. Lord God, move us to, when we leave this place, take action on what we've learned and also use it to feed and inspire and inform others. These things we ask in your precious Son, Jesus' name, amen. So before we begin our conversation during this luncheon, we'd like to extend an invitation for you to join us next week with hundreds of television and film enthusiasts and aficionados at the 22nd Annual American Black Film Festival, June 13th through June 17th at the Lowe's Miami Beach Hotel in Miami Beach, Florida. Please take a look at this one-of-a-kind celebration of Black culture.
Mm-hmm. 16 years ago, ABFF was the first organization, first committee, first anything that ever honored me with an award.
This is such a crucial space for Black filmmakers. This is where I started. This is where Ryan Coogler started. So many of us that are just trying to make something for the first time. This is the place.
The first major festival to have my work online.
I'd like to thank the Fridays for putting together something where we can come together and feel represented. I hope that we all continue to do that for each other.
In a lot of ways, I think that ABFF has helped create this space that Queen Sugar is in.
Me going pro started because another Black man recognized me, bigged me up.
That's why this means so much to me, because I'm a product of an institution that said you are enough, that said what you're doing is important, that said that people that look like me can be successful in this industry.
ABFF was there for me. I just want to say thank you.
Thank you to the ABFF. This is amazing.
Thank you for celebrating our art.
Thank you.
You guys are amazing.
For not only creating an award that is commensurate with the artistry that it celebrates, but for creating an award show that in 2 short years has become our Golden Globes.
A space for independent film where we can see ourselves and celebrate ourselves.
I've been in this room on different days and it never looked like this.
ABFF.
ABFF. ABFF represents the very core of what has always sustained us as a people, and that's community.
I don't think we've seen an evening like this ever before.
This is an event you do not want to miss. If you're in the industry, it's great for your career. And if you just love great content, great Black film, television on all platforms, you don't want to miss the American Black Film Festival. Now, without further ado, I have the honor of interviewing this afternoon's featured guest, R. Donahue Peebles, the genius mogul behind America's largest Black-owned real estate development firm. Recognized among the most successful entrepreneurs in the nation, Don Peebles is founder, chairman, and CEO of the Peebles Corporation, one of the country's few privately held national real estate investment and development companies, with a portfolio of current and completed projects totaling more than 6 million square feet and $5 billion. Remember, clap when you hear billion. In cities such as New York, Washington, D.C., Los Angeles, Philadelphia, Boston, Miami Beach, and of course, right here in the city of Charlotte. You may have seen this best-selling author offering his take on the latest business developments as a guest on CNN, Fox, and CNBC. Named by Black Enterprise as one of our Titans, the 40 most powerful Blacks in business, he's joining us today to give us an exclusive look at his plans to transform the city of Charlotte, a $680 million project that will provide real opportunities for entrepreneurs of color. More importantly, you are about to be exposed to an entrepreneurial master who will deliver a master class on business. Please give a round of applause and welcome to the stage the one and only R. Donahue Peebles. So this man, we could do a 3-hour session and we would not run out of material. We're going to try to cover a lot of ground in a limited amount of time, but it'll be worth every minute. Let's start out with the news at the top. Tell me about what you're doing here in Charlotte. What's going on here with the People's Corporation?
Well, first of all, we want to change the way business is done. A big part of our company, our philosophy is affirmative development. So we want to be transformative. So creating economic opportunities and career opportunities for African-American entrepreneurs and professionals. And so in Charlotte, we committed to doing 35% at a minimum of all of our contracts across the board on our project. By the way, I heard the number. Our project's going to be well over $1 billion now. It'll be about 3 million square feet. 12 buildings. And we're building in a neighborhood in the 2nd Ward called Brooklyn Village, not far from here. And Brooklyn Village was historically an African-American community. And it was demolished in the 1960s for urban renewal. And then with the promise that it would be redeveloped. And unfortunately, it never was redeveloped, and then it became offices for government offices and so forth. And so we're going to build several hotels, 2 hotels. We're going to build a large number of apartments, office buildings, lots of retail, several parks, and a lot of open space, and build a neighborhood within Uptown that will reflect the diversity of Charlotte and the diversity of our country.
Excellent, excellent. I want to go to the beginning, but going to the beginning actually is a great for the first business lesson that we talked about during our call in preparation for this conversation. You said that it's important to sell where you are, but not be stuck where you are. Talk about your beginning, starting out as a real estate appraiser, having left Rutgers University at the time as a freshman after your freshman year to pursue a business and a career that may have seemed relatively modest at the beginning, certainly compared to what you're doing today. Talk about that transition.
I grew up in Washington, D.C. and Detroit, Michigan. So I lived in Detroit from 1968 to 73, so from 8 till 13 years old, and then back to D.C. I was raised by my mother, and my mother had me at 19 years old, and so she worked as a secretary, and then ultimately had an interest in real estate, became a real estate agent, a real estate broker, and I saw the challenges that she went through in that business as a woman and as an African-American woman, tremendous challenges. And so I ultimately spent my last 2 years of high school working on Capitol Hill as a page and an intern, and for John Conyers and Ron Dellums. And so after graduating, I went to Rutgers University to be a doctor. And then I changed my mind, wanted to do something else. I wanted to be a business person. And so I quit. And I came back to Washington, D.C. and began to work as a sales agent in 1979. So interest rates were about 20%. So getting somebody to qualify was extremely challenging. So to supplement my income, I became an appraiser. And so I grew that business as an appraiser. And by 1983, around the time I was 23, I started my own appraisal business. And my clients were the Department of Housing and Urban Development, the Veterans Administration. And mainly, I appraised low to moderate income houses for mortgages that were insured by HUD or the Veterans Administration. And so that was the beginning of my business. But that was where I was starting, but it wasn't anywhere where I expected or visualized, getting to. So I wanted to be a developer, frankly, from the time I was a teenager, seeing downtown Washington, D.C. being redeveloped. I wanted to be a developer. And so ultimately, I chaired the city's property tax appeal board, where many developers came there. And so people who seem like icons to me, I see their name and their sign on these buildings, they were just other men, other human beings. Now, unfortunately, none of them were African-American. And but I felt that DC was changing. We just had elected for this re-elected our African-American Mayor, Marion Barry, who was focusing on economic empowerment. So I thought that this was a business I could get into. And so fortunately, as I built my appraisal business, which supported me financially, helped me develop expertise and build some capital, I was able to work on my first building, which came 3 years later. That building was, I built an office building, pre-leased it to the District of Columbia government, and what is now Bank of America. And I started on that 3 years after I started my appraisal business. So by 26, I was working on my first office building.
Wow.
And that building, we finished it in '89 when I was 28, just getting ready to turn 29. And that was my first building, made me a multimillionaire. And it took me from the appraisal business into the development business. We still own that building today. The city's released their space in there several times. And my son is actually overseeing the renovation of the building right now.
Wow, wow. So now I know this man's story, and still, every time he tells me his journey, it still blows my mind. So he says casually, yeah, I was a multimillionaire, you know, 5 years after I left school, 28 years old, own my own building. I mean, you said a couple of things that I really want you to kind of emphasize as a point of the entrepreneurial teaching, the lesson that comes out. One, you believed in being the best at what you were doing today, but using that to learn everything you could for what you wanted to be doing tomorrow. So talk about that ability to really zero in on excellence in the moment, to be the best appraiser you could be, the best developer you could be, even at 23, 24, 25, but also having this vision that you've had since you were a teenager, that this was something you did to learn what you needed to do to get to where you wanted to go.
Okay. Well, look, I probably have a disorder, and I'm sure if you asked my wife, she would say this. I did business as though my life depended on it. So when I was at 23, failing wasn't an option, and also kind of coasting wasn't an option. I mean, if you look at it from a realistic perspective, fewer opportunities come to people of color. I mean, even today. And so I felt that these opportunities were very precious. And so I wanted to be better at that than anybody else, or amongst the best in terms of being able to appraise these houses and so forth, and to grow within that industry. So I took courses, I read lots of books to understand it, and then I grew that business into doing commercial appraisals as well.
Oh, okay.
And so I expanded the business. I also was appointed to the Property Tax Appeal Board in Washington, D.C. that oversaw all of the real estate assessments and taxes for all buildings in Washington, D.C. So I was appointed to that board at 23, and then at 24, the mayor made me its chairman. So that was an influential position, but also I got to see the economics of almost every major building in Washington, D.C. So that educated me as well. So I got a sense of being able to get an education in the business and transition into doing commercial appraising as well. So I had this focus of running my business, making that as successful as I possibly could, growing it by hiring people and so forth, and then looking towards the future of how do I get into the development business and hiring people who could liberate me a bit from the day-to-day appraising and free me up to start pursuing my other business. And so that was really the focus, because I had to do what I was doing very well and maintain that, because that's how I earned a living. And that was the business that I had. And my dream was to become a real estate developer, but I couldn't put all my eggs in the basket of my dreams as opposed to what I had in front of me.
So now I'm going to transition more into the masterclass, because we could do an hour just on your journey, but I really want to get through connecting the business principles there's a book called The People's Principles, by the way, so you want to pick that up. But how you adopted certain principles along the way that help drive you to the success that you've achieved, and still drive you. You don't consider yourself done by any stretch of the imagination.
Not yet.
So one of them is you have a real passion, which is one of the reasons why you're here. He's spoken at our conference before, for replicating your success through mentorship, through helping to train other people. And you stress that there's no shame in having a job if you're really approaching that job with an entrepreneurial mindset. It's not entrepreneurship or a job. It's you're entrepreneur all the time, because the job is a chance to learn. So talk to me about that and how that translates to your passion for trying to replicate the Don Peoples, now and going forward.
Right. Thank you. Look, I think, first of all, we all have to invest in the next generation, and we all have to reinvest in our community. So that means if we have some knowledge to share, we ought to do that. And if we can open up doors for other people, we ought to do that. And so one of the things I do is every day of the week, of the business week, when I'm in my office and not traveling, I either meet with an aspiring entrepreneur or someone who's early in their career as an entrepreneur, or have a phone call with them. So at least between 15 minutes and 30 minutes a day I spend doing just that, because I believe that we ought to make sure that we teach people. And also, I learned very early on, business is not complicated. Science is complicated. And I happen to be in the most simplistic business there is, which is supply and demand. If demand exceeds supply, prices go up, and there's a good, hospitable market to do business in. If supply exceeds demand, then things go down, not a good environment. So very simple. But in terms of, the principles I learned along the way, I mean, there was no roadmap for what I wanted to do. I'll never forget in Washington, D.C., which I considered the mecca of African-American entrepreneurship. Atlanta and D.C. are the meccas of economic opportunity for Black people. So and one of the things I did as a young person is I wanted to learn. So most of my peer group, especially as I became more successful, were 20 years older than me, 25 years older than me. And so they were in a different place in life, but I could learn from them. And I used to have a poker game where we all played together. And so this would have been, say, probably about 1988, 1990. Forbes magazine had published the Forbes 400 list of the richest Americans in it. And so there were about 6 of us gearing up for the poker game. And I heard the discussion of, oh, wait, there are no brothers in there, no brothers or sisters in there, and there'll never be one. And I'm like, whoa, wait a minute. To myself, I said, wait a minute, I may be there. That's my goal, one of them. And so I realized that people can give you advice, but they're going to be naysayers, and you're going to have to figure out your own roadmap. What did Teddy Roosevelt say about the critic and the doer? And so it's the doer that deserves the accolades even when they fail, because you can't succeed without doing. And so I figured, I'd learn and figure it out myself and read and learn from other people who were doing things I wanted to do. And that was really kind of the approach I took. And then also looking to be very good at what I was doing, but also not being satisfied with it. I mean, to say that I can do more, I can do something different. And then when the obstacles that came, and they undoubtedly come to all of us, when the obstacles came to me, it was, okay, where's the opportunity in this obstacle? Where's the opportunity in the challenge? And so I adopted a philosophy that each setback is an opportunity in disguise. And so it's my intellectual and business challenge to figure out where the opportunity is within this setback. And so that approach has taken me from that one building, which was at that time a $10 million building, and today it's probably a $40 million building, to what we're doing in Charlotte, or building the tallest building in the Western United States in downtown Los Angeles. It's $1 billion too. Right. I mean, so the journey can be as long, and you can travel as far as you want to travel if you're willing to work hard, develop an expertise in that space, and have some luck.
I love this, this whole thing, because one of the things is, I tell you, we have to raise a generation of children that could say billion without stuttering. And you're like, yeah, what's 1.2? Because we're Americans in general, but certainly African Americans in particular, because of our history in this country. After you get past 1 million, it all sounds the same. So it's part of it is getting a sense of vision, and you have a real strong sense of vision. And you stress to me the importance of, once you have that vision, not being dissuaded. And a lot of times the dissuaders will be the people that love you.
Right.
Talk to me about the importance, your no limitations belief, your passionate belief that there are really no limitations other than what you're allowed to be imposed on you.
Well, so look, I mean, I love my mother more than, at that time when I was starting off before I got married, I loved my mother more than anybody in the world. I respected her, and she was someone I respected her judgment in. And so when,
yeah.
And so when I had the opportunity to be put on the property tax appeal board, a board that she actually served on several years back, she told me that I didn't want it, that it was too much of a hot seat. And so I realized at that point, I thought about it. I went back home to my apartment. And I thought about, why would she tell me that? I mean, and she wanted to protect me from harm's way. But I mean, you can't knock anybody out in boxing without being willing to get hit. You cannot be successful in business if you're afraid to lose. You can't be successful in anything. You will not have a successful marriage or relationship if you're not willing to take some risk. So I thought about it. Here's a person who loves me so much, and she's telling me not to do it. But I knew that it would put me in a different place. And so while she wanted to protect me, I thanked her for her advice, and I rejected it, and I did what I thought was best. And then a year later, when I had the opportunity to be chairman, she said, "Oh, you definitely don't want to do that."
Wow.
And I said, "Well, whoa, wait a minute." I thought to myself, well, I will be, at 24 years old, one of the most powerful people within the government of Washington, D.C. when it comes to real estate. That can only result in good things. So I learned it from her that there will be naysayers who actually love me and care about me that will try to protect me. But it's my job to protect myself. And then, of course, there are other people, and this world is full of them, that don't mean us good things, but are naysayers because they see their own failings by seeing someone else being willing to go out there and accomplish things. And so
that's a word right there. That is a word.
So we have to ignore them and get energy from them. I mean, there are many people who would love to see me fail. I mean, but that's on them. I mean, and if they're living their life worrying about what I'm doing, then they're not living their own lives. So I tell people, and I think this is most important, is you've got to use good judgment, but you've got to dance to your own music. I mean, there's no other way around it and then also look at the source of the advice.
Yes.
Now, Bill Gates tells me something, that's a different story. I mean, but if somebody who is not where I want to be, who's never been where I want to be, I mean, I don't know what they could teach me. They could maybe teach me values if they have them, but I mean, they can't tell me how to live my career. So I think that was one of the biggest challenges early on. And it's one of the things I see people struggle with is how to ignore the naysayers, how to ignore the well-intended ones, which are the most difficult to ignore.
So talk to me about, and I want to stick with, you're teaching our audience here, but this is also, I'm sure, what you teach to the people you mentor and advise, and even some of the people you may even do business with. What are the things that you insist on for their development, for them to be able, one, to be able to do business with you from a quality standpoint, from an integrity standpoint, and then from the nuts and bolts operational standpoint of being excellent in business, even if they're not in your business?
Okay, well, I think the first thing I tell people who want to be business people, it's a way of thinking. I mean, it is a way of thinking, and you can develop that way of thinking. Think like a business person. So I tell young people who we funded a hospitality high school, an entrepreneurial academy in a hospitality high school in Washington, D.C. And the goal was to teach young kids the concept of thinking like entrepreneurs. So when you work at McDonald's and you're earning minimum wage, you're not in a minimum wage job. You're actually being paid to learn how to run a McDonald's. So if you change how you think, right, then there's no limitation. And so everybody who works for me, needs to think like entrepreneurs. And they need to think of, and it's hard for them, it's impossible for this to be done, but I want them to strive for it, to think of how they're spending my money like they'd be spending their own money, how they're taking risk. But we're a collection of entrepreneurs. So I think it's a mindset. And so I tell young people who are looking about being, in their careers, that it's a mindset that you can develop. The reason I wrote the Peebles Principles is I was doing a deal in turn on the TV and it's CNN, it's Larry King Live. And there's a guy, a real estate developer from New York, talking about how, entrepreneurs are born. You can't develop it, you're born with it. I'm like, whoa, I know this guy. His father made $600 million and started him in business. And so
he was born with something.
Being an entrepreneur, one vehicle and one way to get there is to be born into it. And so I thought he was so wrong about that. This guy's now president of our country.
Wow.
But I figured that if he's going to tell people, that you can't develop the entrepreneurial skill. It was a lie. I said, because I'm sitting here. My father was an auto mechanic. The man I'm named after was a janitor in a segregated public school. My maternal grandfather was a hotel doorman for 41 years in a city that I now own hotels in. My mother had me at 19 years old and was a secretary who had a high school, high school education. And I'm where I am. So entrepreneurship is a highly developable skill set. And so I wrote the People's Principle so people can understand that it is, and that anyone is an entrepreneur in all of us. It's a mindset, how you think about it. And are you willing to take the risk to pursue your dream? And I think most people who don't achieve their goals give up on them before they get a chance to achieve them. Many don't even run the race in the beginning. They're afraid to fail. I mean, and there's nothing wrong with failing. The worst thing is to not try, because then one day, you know, late in life, you're saying, okay, life hasn't taken me where I want to go. And that reason is most likely that you did not pursue your chance. Now, as African Americans, we should expect it to be more difficult. It should be harder to do this. I mean, it is. It shouldn't be. It should be. We should be in a meritocracy, but we're not. And hopefully one day we'll get there. But right now, it's going to be more difficult. So that means that we have to do something that others don't have to. And that means that we have to help each other. We need to work together. We need to be a resource. So if someone calls us for advice, we have to be available to give it to them. We got to root for each other. I mean, we got to hope for success.
You know, I want to build on that theme, because one of the things that you told me when we had our conversation a couple of weeks ago, and I'm leading to, you already mentioned the term race, in terms of people getting in the race, running the race, but you stressed that it's not a sprint, it's not a marathon, it's a relay race, meaning it's what happens beyond from generation to generation. So I want to start with one point that you said, it's never too early to teach our kids entrepreneurship, financial management, the power of personal choice, the daringness to dream for goals. It's never too early. Talk a little bit about that.
Look, my wife and I have raised our children. We have a 24-year-old son and a 15-year-old daughter. And we have raised them to have bigger thoughts, to think about what's going on in their society, to understand what's going on politically, to know that they can have what they want if they're willing to work for it, to talk to them about what I do and what our business does and where we're going as a business. What are some of the challenges and frustrations of running the business? So over time, they learn that. And the whole idea here is, I mean, I work for our children to have the freedom of choice. You know, I was with Warren Buffett last week, and he said that he wanted to give his kids enough money to do whatever they wanted, but not enough to do nothing. I mean, I think that where we have to go is a different place. You know, we have to have high expectations of our kids. I mean, especially as entrepreneurs. If you look at Black Enterprise, I mean, Black Enterprise published in 1973. I was 13 years old. That was my first introduction. I was a reader as a young teenager. So, and I was an only child, so a lot of time by myself. So I read Black Enterprise and Jet and Ebony and so forth. But I read Black Enterprise because it talked about business. So, and so Earl started Black Enterprise. Earl Gray Sr. started it in 1970, and he built a great company. And then when Butch went into the business and ultimately took it over, he didn't start off where Earl Sr. was in 1970, in 1973 when they published. He started off where Earl was at that time and where the company was at that time. And so the baton was changed. So think of it as a 4x1 relay. And you got 4 legs here to get to the finish line. So first generation is going to take it one way, and then they pass the baton, and they should give it up, you know, before they fall down.
Let go. I mean, right.
And then the next generation, which is almost always the case, by the way, the next generation, they run harder than the first generation because they've watched the first generation get to where they are and build a business, and they see the sacrifices, and they have also been raised by somebody who's gone through the school of hard knocks. Right. It's the third generation that has to get the kick in the butt to know that they got to run harder than the second leg. So, but it's a relay, and we need to look at it that way. It's not diminishing for our children to work in our businesses. It's not unreasonable for us to expect them to have an interest in our business and to look at it as a great opportunity. You know, I tell my daughter, she doesn't like the economic modeling and so forth of our business. I said, well, you can learn how to do it, but then you can take the business somewhere else on a more creative side. But as an entrepreneur, so I think that it's that idea of having the expectations and then also making it an environment where they can, you know, have their own individuality as well. But I don't think we're going to catch up at all if we don't build generational wealth, which is one of the reasons I've been against the estate tax, because I think here we are, we finally make some money, and then we got to sell our businesses to pay taxes to the federal government, while others have gone a long distance under different circumstances. So people tell me, what's it like to be a Black business person in real estate or in business? And I said, visualize this. The Indianapolis 500 race, driver A and driver B. They both have Ferraris, and they're great cars. They're equivalently fast, tested out to be the same speed. Driver A is not as good of a driver as driver B, but driver A starts on lap 400. Driver B starts on lap 1. And the umpires and the officials of the Indianapolis 500 say, hey, this is a fair race because you guys are all in the same car, on the same track, and you're both equally skilled and educated in this sport. So now we have a fair system and a meritocracy, so go have at it. And by the way, driver B, you really have a chance to win. Well, no, driver A can actually have a crash, and as long as they don't kill themselves, they'll have enough time to come up with another car or repair that.
Right. Yeah.
So that means we got to figure out how to get to lap 400 fairly. And that means all to represent and protect our interests. I'll never forget Bill Clinton, a lovely man, probably a pretty good president. I kept getting invited to different, I was on his finance committee, corporate co-chair for the inauguration. I kept getting these invitations to different events, and they were all geared towards race. Now, I'm a business person, you know, worth, you know, by that time, tens of millions of dollars. And so I got invited to another ceremony at the White House to watch him sign welfare reform. So I called up the White House. I said, who do you all think you're writing to? I mean, I'm a business person. How come you can't invite me to an economic summit or something?
Right.
I mean, you want me to come and give you the optics that you can kind of portray this false narrative that many of our people who are struggling are lazy and don't really want to work? I mean, don't ever invite me to anything else like this again. Now, and fortunately, when Barack Obama became president, I then attended the economic summit, was on his jobs forum and the like, because he saw me as a businessman, not as a Black person, and he didn't think all Black people were poor or all Black people cared about welfare reform. I mean, so we have to demand that the people who are empowered are going to open up the doors of economic opportunity, and if they don't, we got to invest in supporting other people. But if you look, there's no accident why there's so much money going into politics by the wealthy, because they want to protect and preserve the status quo. And that doesn't work for us.
Literally in 1 minute and 10 seconds, we're going to have Q&A. All right. Some of y'all have heard my speech before. You heard Bush Graves. It's Q&A. It's not Quansers, as our CEO says. It's not what happened was, you know, it's not let me give you my business pitch while I'm up here. The goal is to get as many questions in as possible, because for every question that is asked, there's 50, maybe 100 people in the room who didn't get to ask, but who need to hear the answer. So we're going to have question and answer. And we're going to get as many questions in as possible. But I want you to keep that in mind. And I promise you, if you break the rule, I will cut you off. I'm your moderator right now, not your host. So let's get our, do we have our first question? Okay.
All right. How you doing, sir?
Good. How are you?
I'm great. What was one book that changed your life?
Ted Turner's book, It Wasn't as Easy as It Looks.
Now, when somebody gives you a book, that means you got to go out and get it and read it.
How you doing, Mr. Donahue? Stephen Price. I'm from Washington, D.C., and I remember your name being up all over the place. Outstanding. Thank you for being here. My question is this. Being such a young African-American, what was the resistance like around you while you were progressing through the different agencies and becoming very well known in Washington, D.C.?
I mean, I was very lucky. I was born in Washington, D.C. in 1960. So I was born at Freedman's Hospital, which is now Howard University Hospital. It's the only private hospital my mother could have me in Washington, D.C., because it was a segregated city. But by the time I was 14, the city got home rule, as you may recall, and it elected its first mayor, Walter Washington. And then 4 years later, it elected someone who his whole agenda was economic empowerment for Black people, to right the scales. And that was because, I mean, Marion, John Lewis and so many others who went through the civil rights movement, they had made a decision around, younger than I was at that time, to say that it was unacceptable and unbearable, and they'd rather die than live under the conditions and the rules that were imposed upon them then. So, and then they comforted themselves while they were in jail or being beaten up, that one day they would change things, that they'd get a result. So DC was an environment where the system was actually, at that point in time, geared to see us be successful. And so, Marion Barry appointed me as chairman of the most powerful board in the city when I was 24 years old. There'd be nobody else who would have done that. I can't think, maybe Maynard Jackson. But so I didn't see that resistance there. And also the tone in DC was set by Barry. So the private sector also understood that there were new rules to the game. And the one thing about business is efficient. So whatever you tell business people the rules are, they'll figure out how to exploit them and work within them.
Right.
So that was what happened in DC. I think I faced greater challenges with the more money I got and going to South Florida, which I think was the biggest challenge in my career. Wow. Because it was oppressive, didn't respect African Americans at all. And at that point in time, I was ahead. I had the resources financially to fight back. But DC, I have to say, was the best place at my time. I was very lucky. Of being born in New York City, you would not know me or know who I was. So that was just, I got lucky.
Excellent.
Hello. The African American community lose 30,000 acres in land ownership per year, and I provide legal services to Black farmers in 9 states in the South, and they're losing their land to USDA.
It doesn't feel like a question.
Can you suggest ways for capital outside of USDA for the farmers?
Yeah, look, actually, that's an issue that's happening right now at the moment because of these tariffs that have been imposed by our government. These other governments are now imposing them as well. And so what's going to happen here is that many farmers are going to have the same challenges, not just African-American farmers, but all farmers. So Trump is going to come up with a solution to deal with the white farmers because that's a part of his base. Where you all and where all of us need to do is we need to tell the 50 African-American members of Congress that we elected, that you are not elected to be the resistance and fight for a progressive agenda that doesn't involve us. You're there to advocate for African Americans. And given the dynamics of Congress right now, where it's Republican dominated and he's the president, he's going to get something passed. And so the thing that they need to do is be effective. And that means cut a deal with him that includes Black farmers and make sure that that's done. We cannot put the Black agenda on hold just because we don't like who got elected. Most of the presidents, so that's the answer.
So let's give a round of applause to that young lady that asked really an excellent question. I think I got a little trigger happy. Just so you know, it's an itchy trigger finger. So,
my name is Jermaine Scott. My question is regarding to the Brooklyn Village. I know it's going to replace the previous community that was in Charlotte. How is that going to compare to what you've seen in established cities and other cities that are compared to Charlotte, the Austin and the Dallases of the world, when they say they're the upcoming cities? How is the Brooklyn Village going to compare to what you've seen there?
Well, first of all, I look at Charlotte as being almost where DC was back in 1980, where you had this movement of African-American power that was political power that was going to focus on transcending it to economic power. So I think there's no better place to start or be a Black business person, I think, today than Charlotte. I think Charlotte's got tremendous opportunities. Well, I mean, what we're doing in Brooklyn Village is, transformative. I don't think we would have gotten the opportunity to do something along the scale that we're doing here in Charlotte outside of, say, New York or LA, because, I mean, there's not the density available and not the political will of the elected officials here. I would say that the elected officials here, Black and white, have been focused on providing a broad economic opportunity for inclusiveness. So I mean, it's different than any place else we've done business.
Excellent. Next question.
Sir, if you had the opportunity to start all over again in commercial real estate, how would you do it, and what would you do differently than in Washington, D.C.?
I would have married my wife a year earlier. I don't think, look, I mean, I like to Monday morning quarterback just so I get better at what I'm doing. But I think that I would have left Washington, D.C. a little earlier. I mean, maybe, and looked beyond. I think I got to a point where I was so established in D.C. that the game, got to be pretty routine. And so I was so entrenched there, I couldn't visit borders. So I would have left sooner. But other than that, I've been pretty happy with the journey I've taken in the initial movements in my career.
Yeah, that's interesting because there's a saying that I have. A couple of my mentees are in the audience too, so they've heard this. Success is a test that's easy to fail. So you were comfortable in DC, and it almost closed your eyes and your mind to what was possible because you were, it was all good.
Yep, I mean, it was all good, and only when the environment changed and I lost a deal where from the city of Washington, where I was $58 million less expensive to my nearest competitor, and the political environment had become toxic to Black business people, and we didn't get that deal. And I said, my God, if I can't win at $58 million less, then, and I certainly wasn't intending to be $58 million less, if I can't win under those circumstances, then I need to figure it out and do something else. And then I happened to go on vacation to Miami, and then I saw the opportunity there. And I think that's a big part of also about evolving, is seeing opportunity wherever you are. I mean, to be open to you're a business person 24 hours a day. I mean, so there's an opportunity everywhere.
Excellent. Next question, sir.
Yes. Hi, Don. My name is Glenn Hudson, and I structure multifamily real estate development deals, and I teach it as well. And we have less than 0.5% African-American developers across the country. And so my question to you is, how would we grow African-American developers in the field of multifamily and commercial development?
I mean, that's a great question. And by the way, I mean, it's when I go and do business with bankers, lawyers, and so forth, I said, don't you all know I'm coming over here? Could you at least put one African-American somewhere in visibility so I feel a little more comfortable? I mean, come on, you're putting out these cookies and coffee and so forth. I mean, it's horrible. So, but that's the reason. The reason why is that this is a capital-intensive business. So, as we talked about, my first deal in 1986 was $10 million. The Royal Palm Hotel Manhattan is $540 million. And then the stuff we're doing here is $1 billion, $1.2 billion. So it's very capital intensive. So it's access to capital. I mean, that's been the biggest challenge, going to the funds and so forth. But it's actually pretty simple, just like the business. But we have to be engaged. So the biggest investor in commercial real estate are public pension systems. Okay, I mean, Los Angeles County municipal employees, California public retirement system, public employees retirement system, and so forth. So these pension systems who have significant diversity, like California teachers, New York teachers, North Carolina teachers. So you have these pension systems where they are more reflective, the people who pay into them are more reflective of the population. So there are higher levels of diversity. Almost all of them, other than the construction trades, their membership is majority women. So you got a majority female, but yet New York City, for example, the city of New York is 67% minority. The investors in their public pension systems exceed 50% minority, and 53% of the city is female. And yet the city's contracting at the city level does less than 2% of its contracts to minority and women-owned businesses combined. The public pension system investment with investment advisors is minority investment advisors or women investment advisors is less than 2%. So what needs to happen is, see, no one's paying attention. And so the big funds, the Goldman Sachs, the Apollos, the BlackRocks, the Blackstones, I mean, do you know that BlackRock started off 30 years ago? I mean, not even 30 years ago, and they manage almost $1 trillion. I mean, it's an insane amount of money. So, but it's public pension funds. So we have to be politically engaged because most of these treasurers and controllers are elected by us. So it's not enough to talk about, you know, other issues or welfare reform or whatever. How about investing money within our community? So that's why, and by the way, until we get focused on that space, you're never going to see a major movement when it comes to African Americans. Do you know that most of the public housing in New York City is built by non-minority?
Question, even more excellent answer. This will be the last question.
Hi, my name is Lauren Miller, and my question is, as successful and accomplished as you are, what keeps you awake at night?
I mean, something happening to my children or my wife. I mean, you know, something happening to my family. I mean, those are problems that I can't solve. I mean, money, I mean, look, I look at money in a different way, though. I mean, I looked at it one way when I didn't have it. I mean, and then it had high value, it was very precious and so forth. And then after I kind of got it out of my system, all the things that I was denied when I didn't have it, I mean, after a while, it becomes numbers on a screen. If you asked me today how much money I had in the bank, I couldn't tell you. How much I'm worth, I could guess at it. I mean, but it becomes, I mean, it's a man-made product, and it's numbers on a computer screen. So I can't get my self-worth from that. I can't get my happiness from that, nor does it scare me. I mean, they're man-made. I mean, my business, I choose to do it. So if it ever got too unpleasant, I'll just stop. I mean, I'm creating my own stress there. So it's irritating, but not really stressful because it's a man-made problem. The problems that worry me are the ones that I couldn't solve and that my money couldn't solve or my hard work couldn't solve. And so health issues to my family. Look, my mother was one of 5 sisters, 5 girls. My grandfather had 5 girls, and my mother was the middle. My mother passed away a few years ago. Her eldest sister, 40 some odd years ago, had lymphoma, got chemotherapy, and was treated for that, went into remission for 40 plus years. Now it's come back, and she's at the, she's gonna, I mean, doesn't have much more time left. That's what keeps me up at night. But there's not a business problem that keeps me up at night.
Excellent. Let's give a round of applause to our Donahue people.
Thank you. Thank you.
Oh, thank you so much.
And can we give a warm round of applause to our amazing moderator, Alfred Edmond?